So you want to be a PC player, huh? What's up, my fellow weirdos? Fever here. How is everyone today? Hope you're being good, staying out of trouble. There's some hype surrounding Destiny 2's fall expansion Beyond Light, and I know some of you are considering making the jump to PC before it drops. So in this video, we're going to discuss some things I wish I knew before making the switch. We'll also go over some keybinds and peripherals that'll help you make the move. Most of what we go over in this video applies to a lot of games, not just Destiny. I will be mentioning a few sites and content creators in this video, so I'll be sure to leave links to everything in the description. But before we get started though, if there's one thing you take away from this video, let it be this. There are no wrong settings, equipment, or keybinds. It's all about personal preference and how you want to play the game. The first thing is, you don't need the most expensive equipment on the market, especially when you're new. I know too many players that went out and bought a bunch of crazy or gimmicky equipment that wasn't necessary, myself included. I kept buying equipment thinking I was going to help, but really it didn't do anything except hurt my wallet. And trust me, a $5,000 PC isn't needed to check your 0.4 KD in PvP. If you're going to build the PC yourself, make sure you do some homework first. There are websites such as PC Part Picker that can help you make sure everything is compatible. Go on Reddit if you need to. Ask lots of questions. This also applies to your peripherals like monitor, keyboard, and mouse. I'm not going to tell you a $2 Walmart keyboard is the same as a $350 alt drop, but the market has changed over the years. I have bought a $50 mechanical keyboard off of Amazon and it felt no different than some of my more expensive ones. The only peripheral I would say splurge on would be the monitor. That's more of a one-time purchase, at least for a while. You're probably going to try out different keyboards and mice along the way until you find the right size and weight you want. There's all kinds of keyboards, from full all the way down to just a keypad itself. There's going to be a lot of trial and error, trust me. A good website to check out first is the Gaming Setup. They have a ton of information on mouse size, keyboards, and just about everything else in between. Second, frames and field of view. The frames and field of view can be a little disorienting at first. You can get some really high frame rates, but they aren't everything in a game unless you plan to play competitively. It's usually recommended to get as close to 144 FPS for PvP and have a refresh rate monitor that could support it. There's no point in spending a bunch of money on PC and then going with a really low refresh rate monitor because it'll cap out. Consoles have anywhere from 30 to 60 frames per second and a field of view of like 80. Now with a PC, you jump to a much higher frames and a field of view of 105 if you choose to. That's a big difference. The 105 field of view is almost like a fisheye effect. It allows you to see more of the open world or PvP map on the screen by zooming out a bit. You'll feel like you're moving at the speed of light, which is fun as hell, but be careful if you start feeling a little funny or get a headache, because you need to adjust slowly. Make sure you take a break. Next thing, when you first make the switch to mouse and keyboard, you're going to be stiff as a board. That is okay and completely normal. My best advice is to not go crazy in whatever game you play. Just take your time, start off with some simple, really easy activities, and don't beat yourself up. The worst thing you could do is go into your normal hard stuff and get frustrated because you can't play the way you usually do on console. It'll be disheartening and sometimes infuriating, but whatever you do, stick with it. That brings me to the fourth, the DPI and sensitivity, which is another one of those things that has no best setting. It's honestly something you'll probably change numerous times before settling on something more permanent. DPI stands for dots per inch. It's basically a measurement of how your cursor moves depending on how much you move the actual mouse. The higher the DPI, the less you have to move the mouse on your mouse pad. This ties in with look and ADS sensitivity. The sensitivity is how fast your character could turn around depending on mouse movement. It's almost like a software multiplier for your DPI. I found that a lot of competitive players stick between 400 and 800 DPI with a sensitivity of 3 to 7. You also need to keep in mind what kind of games you play and how you use the mouse. Do you use your whole forearm on a big mouse pad, or do you just move your wrist around on a small pad? These are all factors in the DPI and sensitivity settings. You're probably going to spend a lot of time trying to fine tune it. I even started asking my friends what they ran thinking it would help, but it didn't. My suggestion would be, try a setup, see how you like it, and make sure you give it a few days between each change. If you keep switching settings every hour, it may take a lot longer to settle on something. Number 5. PC is a different animal. Everyone moves way different and it's a little nutty at first. You're gonna see warlocks acting like an AC-130, hunters moving in ways you never thought were possible, and titans looking like a crayon-eating freight train. In PvP, flanking is out of the question and PvE is more chaotic than ever. I hear friends who are still on a console say PC is easy mode, but the truth is, people come to PC to unlock their potential because the skill ceiling is much higher. And please don't take that out of context. I'm not trying to say that console players are not as good as PC players. We just have more tools in our toolbox to play with, and we're not restricted. I used to think I was pretty good on console, then I moved to PC and got walked on daily. On a side note, something else I'd like to say is learn Discord. I know it sounds like an odd thing to mention, but I know too many people that came from Xbox and PS4 where you just jump in a party, to Discord where you create servers and all kinds of good stuff. So take the time to learn it. I promise it'll help. When it comes to keybinds, most games have WASD as the default movement keys, and you don't necessarily need to keep it that way. Some people have moved the keys over to TFGH so their hands are more in the middle of the keyboard. Whatever you do decide on for your movement keys, try and keep all the other binds around them in a comfortable location. What I mean by that is, I use WASD as my movement keys, so all my other keybinds, like 2, 3, 4, QER, FZX, surround them, and that's what's comfortable for me. Your hands might not be as flexible, or maybe you could fold your fingers up like a pretzel. Either way, you need to figure out what works for you. You also need to keep in mind what types of games you play, because the goal is to settle on a good keybind layout that can be used across different games without having to relearn keys every time you go play something else. And not every key needs to be on the keyboard itself. Currently, I'm trying out an ambidextrous mouse, so I have 4 side buttons to work with as well. If you have a problem with the keys, mouse buttons 4 and 5 can help with that greatly. I'll go over some of my keybinds and settings in Destiny as a reference to kind of give you an idea of where to start. But after this video, I recommend you check out some other content creators like Cammy, Aztecross, or Band Wipe as well. They have some pretty good videos about their settings, which you might be able to cherry pick a few ideas. And these guys are monsters in PvP, by the way. But I'm sure you knew that already. For the common keybinds, I left everything standard like the WASD for forward, backwards, left, and right. The character keybinds are where things vary between players. For fire, reload, and zoom, everything is pretty standard as well. My melee, finisher, crouch, jump, and block all rely on my thumb. The way my hand rests and the position of my keyboard, I'm able to pivot my thumb on left alt, X, C, spacebar, and V without taking my fingers off the directional keys. Depending on your mouse, many players prefer to use mouse buttons 4 or 5 to melee, block, or crouch. In some games like Destiny, crouching is how you slide after sprinting, and having crouch on your mouse might throw off your aim a hair because you could press the button hard during a heated battle, which could move your mouse. If you notice, I also have a secondary keybind on jump, which is the scroll wheel. Depending on the game, character, or jump I use, the scroll wheel can be very beneficial. The Titan catapult jump can get you around the map pretty fast. Shift and control are the standard sprint crouch button in most games I've played, and you have the choice of holding or toggling both of them. I'm just lazy and I don't like holding the button down, but holding crouch is a good habit to have in PvP. If you toggle crouch, that's one extra button press to come back up, but I never sit still, so I cancel the crouch before sprinting again. The class ability is F, and I find this works best for me in just about every game I play, except when I'm on a hunter in Destiny. The hunter has a shade step that is directional. It's hard to shade step right because you take your finger off the D button to tap F. Confession time, I never shade step right. The interact button is control, and that's another one some people would disagree with. This goes back to the way my hand rests and the position of the keyboard. I find it much easier for me to get a res on another player by holding down control with my pinky and strafing with my directional keys while still aiming down the sights. The super or alt is pressing the mouse wheel in, but depending on the game, if you're scroll wheel jumping, you might have an issue with accidentally activating it. To switch weapons, I use 2, 3, 4, and Q. I usually don't use the Q, but I have it that way depending on the keyboard that's being used. One of my keyboards doesn't have a number row on top. I use 2, 3, and 4 instead of 1, 2, 3. I find it easier than reaching to tap the 1 for the primary. More than likely, you're going to change the keybind several times before you settle on something more permanent. But as long as you keep at it and don't give in, it'll just hit you one day. You're going to try stuff and it's not going to work out how you want it to. Or you jumped instead of sliding, but I promise it'll get better as you go. You'll want to throw your mouse and keyboard out the window to pick up a controller, but it's only going to put you at a disadvantage. I went out into the open world and did basic patrols and strikes until I got the hang of it, and then moved on to bigger things like PvP and raids. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. I will assist you the best I can. Make sure to check out the links in the description below, and I will leave a few websites in there as well where you could find some pretty decent peripherals. Thank you for watching, and as always, have a great day and be good to one another. Thank you.